message series called It's Complicated. You'll say it's definitely complicated when the pastor has an axe in his hand. So you'll say, what is this all about? Well, we're going to get right into it. This has nothing to do with Halloween. I will not put on a hockey mask and chase you around the room. It would be stinking awesome, though. It would be really funny if I did, but it's not the case this morning. So turn your Bibles right now to 2 Kings chapter 6. We're going to dive into 19 verses here. So it would be verse 1 to 19. This is a peculiar story, and that's the reason why we're reading it. So I've been trying to keep this common theme throughout this message series of doing some unique stories out of the Old Testament and tying them into our current day life and what we're going through and how to overcome some of these complications. So this morning, that's what it's all about, is how are we going to overcome these complications. So right here in this crazy, wild story, there's actually truth to how we can apply this wonderful, wonderful, wonderful key called grace. So here we go. 2 Kings chapter 6, verse 1. One day, the group of prophets came to Elisha and told him, as you can see, this place where we meet with you is too small. Let's go down to the Jordan River where there are plenty of logs. There we can build a new place for us to meet. All right, he told them, go ahead. Please come with us, someone suggested. I will, he said. So he went with them. When they arrived at the Jordan, they began cutting down trees. But as one of them was cutting a tree, his axe head fell into the river. Oh, sir, he cried, it was a borrowed axe. Where did it fall, the man of God asked. When he showed him the place, Elisha cut a stick and threw it into the water at that spot. Then the axe head floated to the surface. He grabbed it. Elisha said, grab it. Then the man reached out and grabbed it. The end. What a crazy story, right? You say, well, what's the point? A lot of us could overlook these types of stories in the Bible and go, I don't understand, I don't get it. What's the point? Well, there's actually a lot in this to be used in today and what we can do. Many times we let it get complicated. We look at stories like this and go, I don't get it. I don't see the point. What's the point of Elisha? Why did he have to throw a stick? A lot of questions get starting being asked here. Why do you have to throw a stick into the water to make the axe head rise? Why can't he just walk out there, grab it? Why couldn't Elijah just walk on water, go out there and grab it? Why couldn't something happen? A bird, a fish, swallow it and spit it up out onto the shoreline? Why a stick? So when you start asking these types of questions, it helps out actually to come to the conclusion of these stories and the point of it. So, to the point of it, here we go. The axe head. So when we look at this axe head, it's extremely heavy. Most of us know this. Some of us have swung these things many times. Some of us have never touched one. If you've never touched one, don't ask this morning. This is a borrowed axe. It truly is a borrowed axe. I made sure that it was. It is not sharp. It's brand new. It's not sharpened yet. But it still has a sharp edge to it. So what does this represent? How does this story apply to us? It applies to us in many different ways. We know in Genesis that Adam was cast out of the Garden of Eden because of sin. When he was cast out of the Garden of Eden in Genesis chapter 3 there, he was told that he was going to have to toil, he's going to have to work hard, he was going to have to, basically the ground and him were going to become one. The sweat from the brow, it was going to happen. It was going to be extremely difficult at times. Thorns and so forth would start growing and pluck our skins as we garden this earth. So you'll notice that the heaviness of sin, this is a representation of that work that we have to do now. So you'll say, what was it like in the Garden of Eden? It was just like heaven, we would assume, that everything was kind of there for you. You didn't have to do much. It was walking around enjoying ourselves and no sweat. When we go out to the garden, the garden was already growing. They didn't have to go pick anything. They didn't have to worry about these types of issues. So this right here, this tool, is that tool of Genesis chapter 3, the tool that we have to wield ourselves, carry it around, and accomplish what we need to get accomplished. It's something that many of us overlook at times because it's just become an extension of who we are. Many of us, men and women in this room, blue-collar folk, we go to our factories and we work with equipment day in and day out, but that is a true representation of Genesis chapter 3, our sin. So here you see men in this particular story, down by the river, doing the work, trying to build a larger location so they can share the gospel and to spread the word and all those types of things. And so here they're building along. This guy drops I guess it's a swing. He was swinging away, and as he swung, the axe head flew off. He got all nervous because it was borrowed. It wasn't his, and it became very concerning to him. Obviously, and I love how they use the description here, the man of God. The man of God says, he's concerned. Where was this put? Where is this particular, axe head? So then he took a stick, he cut a tree, and he threw it down in there, and up comes the axe head, floats to the top. He says, grab it. God grabs it and pulls it out. Clearly showing all of us in this room that God is concerned about us. You'll say, help me out a little bit more, Pastor Josh. I will. Here we go. If you want to dive deeper down into the definition of words, when we look at stick, when we look at the Hebrew side of this, we see the word gallows. Some of us will go, oh, gallows. This is what Jesus was hung on, actually. Jesus was hung on some sticks, per se, trees. And so this is exactly a representation of the cross being cut down, thrown into the water and grabbing us out. What happened was, in this moment, we'll see, this is not a far-fetched story. Many people say, oh, you're stretching, Pastor Josh. I'm not stretching. When you talk about a man of God cutting down a stick, throwing it down into the water, and he I guess, strikes the axe head or whatever, and up it comes, however it works. Up comes this axe head, and it floats. What took place, and many of us overlook this, is that the iron took on a new nature. The axe head took on a new nature. What it was is that its old nature caused it to sink, but its new nature caused it to rise up from the mud. That's exactly what happens with us as Christians. That when we ourselves find ourselves down deep into the miry clay, down in the mud of things, and the nasties of nasties, the most difficult of our situations, it's the cross that pulls us out. It takes us from our created nature to our new created nature. And so we float to the top. And when we float to the top, God reaches out and pulls us out of this. And he reminds us that we are not of this world. And this is not truly who we are. Even though, a lot of times we get into this situation, and I've told this time and time again, we feel like work, Monday through Friday, some of us Monday through Sunday. It's one of these crazy situations where it's like this just becomes who we are, our everyday walk, our everyday life. We live to make the money. It's coming to a concerning point in my life for many of you that this is what drives you in this heaviness, this labor of sin that we have to go through every single day. But we've got to take time apart and to give it to God and to say, God, this is not who I am. Who I am is made for you. And so within this story, you'll see many different other things when it comes to sin. Sin causes us to sink. Sin causes us to cut, actually. Sin can hurt. Many of us have experienced bitterness, jealousy. These types of sins will come into our life and actually cut the people around us. We don't necessarily recognize it at first, but the people obviously being hurt see it. And when they see it, they detach from you, making it even worse for you because you feel alone and you feel abandoned. All of this compounds over and over and over and over again. It continues to grow. But until we recognize it's the cross, it's Jesus Christ that we can call upon and pull us out, and we're always going to be lost. We're always going to be confused. Okay, now, I've got over that. Guys, the biggest point of this whole story is this. When we look at those verses in the story, and I mentioned it in the beginning, it's that it's a very complicated story. It is. But by looking at Jesus and what he did and how he came, and looking at that and bringing it to this, then the story wasn't complicated anymore. See, this is what Paul did in the New Testament, and this is the same thing John, all the disciples, they did. What they would do to go to these Jewish synagogues or to these Jewish towns, they would go in there to go, all right, guys, listen, Jesus came. And they'd be like, well, how do you know Jesus came? They would use the story of salvation, the story of Jesus Christ dying on the cross. And they would go back to all of these stories in the Old Testament. They go back to every one of these stories and they would say, see, right here, this is where Jesus, that's why God had Moses do this. That's why Esther did this. This is why Elijah and Elijah did this. Because it all points back to Jesus. It's pointing to this. And Jesus confirmed it. Jesus did it, and it's done. And when they saw it, and they knew of the things that Jesus had done, then immediately it clicked. And they go, he did come. He did. He came to save. And now that makes more sense. Why did Nehemiah build the wall? I don't really still don't know why they saw wheels in the sky. But there's a lot of different stories that you read in the Bible, and it all points to Jesus. So guys, some of us overlook the Bible, and we look at this and we say, our own particular stories, our own particular situations, and we think this was it. It's like the end of Revelation. It's like, doom, it's done. All right, great. It's all complete right here. God's not finished. God's constantly renewing. God's constantly recovering, reviving. He's doing it. God's constantly doing this today with all of us. So in this Bible, what's fantastic and phenomenal is that it never stopped. In your own stories, Jesus is being told. His story, the gospel, everything right here is being told through your own circumstance. You're just ignoring and neglecting the fact that God's doing it because you're just oblivious. You're too concerned, your focus is on the problem and the complication than it is on the redemption and on the clarification of what God can and will and is doing. So if we change our perspective and our approach, then what happens is that we actually will be set free. We will actually come to this whole new perspective and go, oh my gosh, God is in it. God is actually using me. He's through it. He's using. This is it. This is amazing. God actually is alive still to this day. And now my own particular story, it's coming clear to me. God's in it. The cross is there. The salvation, the grace. So that point that I want to be made right now is this. Is that, guys, it's really mind-boggling to me at times that even myself, not us as a whole, but myself personally, I tend to make the situation more complicated, but yet if I was just to go to Jesus, at the moment of the complication, at the moment of the financial struggle, at the moment of the car issue, at the moment of the job, the house, the kids, everything, well, my kids drive me nuts. Well, my kids drive me nuts, Instead of just pulling out the axe of sin and chasing them around the house. I mean, seriously, it's what happens, It's like you pull it out and you're like, rah! And they're, it's like, what's what? But if I was just to put down the sin and say, all right, you know what? Let's talk about Jesus right now. Let's get our minds straight about what it's all about. So in every moment, if my wife and I, we get to those moments where we go, man, financially, it's tight right now. And we don't sit there and go, God, but we got this to pay for still. We got this to pay for. We got that to pay for. Oh my gosh, what if? But if we break all those and we say, oh man, let's just pray right now. Let's just pray because God's in control. God's got this all about. He had it in control from the beginning. What makes us think that he can't now? So this is all a part of this, that if we can just let go. And that's why Jesus, when he came, he continued to speak about this. So in your Bible, it says, Matthew chapter 11, verse 28, turn there. Matthew chapter 11, verse 28. It says, then Jesus said, come to me, all of you who are weary and carry heavy burdens, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you. Let me teach you, because I am humble and gentle at heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy to bear, and the burden I give you is light. There it is, guys. What does make it so difficult? It's like we want to carry around this. It's like it gives, for some reason, we think this gives us power. This is what is our strength. But all this is dangerous, it's heavy, it's hard to carry at times. You look at this as your source. This makes me money. This is what I do. This is it. This is the answer. But it's not the answer. He's telling us to lay it down, to put it at his feet, to walk away and say, I've got it. God's got it. He's in control. And that's why I wanted to show you that video this morning, is that identity of who you are in Christ. Your identity is that you are saved. And now you can live, and that you can set free all this issue of condemnation and all these different things of you're not good enough. You are great. You're fantastic. You have a gift inside of you that God wants to use. Don't let the enemy keep it inside. Let this come out. There's something grand about you guys. There's something that you guys can do more than you ever thought. But if you can continue to keep living in the bondage and keep living in this far-sightedness and the sense of like you can't see past your fingers. It's like, this is it. It's all I can see. I'm just here. I can only see this right here. Guys, God's got a gigantic plan for you. God's got some great things for you. On our way up to the Creeper Trail, there's this giant pumpkin patch you first pass. And the first one, just like, wow, this is beautiful. It's really pretty. It's a couple hillsides, like this little hillside and you see all these little orange dots everywhere. I mean, everywhere. The first thought that goes to my head as a man, I think, man, you gotta plant a lot of pumpkin seeds. That's a lot. My next thing, my wife goes, I wonder if they make an automatic pumpkin picker. That's the next thing, it's like, and then Adam in the back, Adam Askins, he's like, no, you would bruise the pumpkins. And then all of a sudden, Randy's like crazy creative mind, he goes out and he goes, well, maybe if they put like a trampoline in a net, and they'll catch them, like all these different things. We are all saying all these crazy stuff. But as we pass that pumpkin patch, you go just a little bit further on the interstate, and all of a sudden this ginormous field opens up. I mean, there were so many pumpkins. I know my estimation's way off, but I would say it's in the millions. I mean, there were so many pumpkins. It was unbelievable. We are a fat country. You'd be like, what do you mean? That's a pumpkin pie patch is what that is. And they're getting ready for Thanksgiving. You should see. It was crazy. But, looking at it on the outside of this, it seems really complicated. Really complicated. The process of planning all of that, the vast size of it, the harvest of how large it is. On the outside of just traveling on the interstate in our so-called fast lives, We're just speeding along, and you're like, wow, oh, what? Oh, my gosh. We're taking photos. We're sharing them. Check out this. It's nuts. How do people do this, We can't comprehend it. But I guarantee if you ask those farmers the process, they would tell you the process, and they'd be like, yeah, it's some time. But, man, look at the harvest. Look how large it is, the vastness, and how much money I get per pumpkin, and all these different things they're talking about. It takes time. We're not willing to give things time. We're pushing and snapping the finger at God and saying, come on, come on, come on. And just because he's not operating on our time, we tend to think that he's not real, he's not there, he's not evident. But God is there. God is evident. The problem is even in our moments of waiting, like we pick this up and you just start hatching at things. And you're butchering it. You're butchering what you've got in front of you because you're not waiting for him to tell you the particular and right strokes to use. You're just cutting. You're wasting good stuff. You're wasting your time. And even at the moment, you get burnt out. You go, this is dumb. I don't want to do it anymore, God. And God's like, well, wouldn't blame you either. I never asked you to do it. I was telling you that I was going to do it. I was going to do it. That's what he's saying. So guys, in these moments of confusion and complications, you need to take a step back. You need to stop and you say, okay, where's God in this gospel? So if you've ever heard this message before, the Acts message, that's how typically most people will use this message, is to tell you to go back. Because the man of God says to the prophet, says to him, says, hey, where did it land? Where did it go? He says, it's right there. Okay, that's where we're going to start. So the typical message with this is that if you're in a complicated moment, go back to where the complication began. Where did it get very hairy? Where did it get confusing? Where did it get to a point where you go, and you blew up? Go back to that moment and seek God in it. All right, God, take the cross, put it in there, in that spot, and say, all right, now what do we do differently? How do we fix this? How do we mold this to the molding that you want? Because see, we always say this, and even with our own marriages, in our church and different people that we've talked to, is that, God's at the top. He's there. And we've got the husband over here and the wife over here. And there's always going to be a separation to these two because of sin. In our own man, there's separation between all of us. It's sin that separates us. That's why there's moments you can't take people for certain periods of time. After certain moments, you go, oh, gosh. That's why I believe there's a lot of people smoke out in this world, because they want to take smoke breaks from their coworkers. That was funny. Everyone can laugh. I do not condone smoking, though. I'm just saying. But when we look at husband and wife, what happens is we say, all right, as long as you continue to keep moving towards God, you two get closer. So when you find yourself at a separation moment, you go, man, I'm confused. Our marriage is complicated. Well, it's because you're out here, and you stop looking towards God. So you go back and you say, all right, we need to start over. Let's put God in this. And you start asking and putting God into the circumstance. Closer and closer you get to God. That's how this works. But you've got to go back to where you dropped the axe head, because God's going to pull you out. God's going to pull you out and set you on water. I believe a lot of times, I did a sermon. Let me tell you guys, this is not intentional in my message, and I just feel like I want to share it with you because it was funny. My father-in-law, large church up in West Virginia, and he the first Sunday morning, the only Sunday morning I've ever preached at that church. I've never been asked back. It was my first and last Sunday morning message. It's a big deal to get to preach on Sunday morning at that church. My message was so crazy. I mean, it was one of the craziest messages I've ever taught in my entire life. I'm assuming my father-in-law listened to it, and that's the reason why he's never asked me back. But I will share a part of this message with you this morning. I've never re-preached it for reasons. But there's a part of this message that I believe is so true and evident. There's a moment in one of the Old Testament books here. I can't remember now because I've tried to blot out this message, but an angel is walking one of the prophets, and he's showing them all the things to come and the way heaven would be kind of laid out, and the rivers and different things. And there was a point where the river wouldn't go. He got over his head in the river. And so there was a point where he couldn't take him any further. And see, that's where I'm a firm believer when we get into the New Testament and Peter walks out onto the water, is that God's intention was for all of us to float. God's intention is for all of us to walk on water. It's this idea that when we get baptized and we go down and we come up, we're now able to walk on water. And I know some of you are like, well, let's test it out. Fill up the baptism. It's not the case, is what I mean by this. It's metaphorically. But we are Christians now. And in those moments of the storm and the craziness and all those things that come out, and we've got to walk on water, we can do it. We're able to walk on water. That angel, when he was showing this prophet that he could only go to a certain level and he couldn't go any further, the water became too high and over top of the head because there was no baptism yet. There was no redemption and salvation. And so now today we have a privilege like no other. We actually have that redemption. We actually have this, and we're taking it for granted. We're not holding on to this and saying, oh, we can survive, we can walk on water. And when we do have the keys, unfortunately, to the salvation and grace, we sit here and we go, I don't think we can walk on water. It's like you're trying to play this humble card, but really it's ignorant card. It's like, oh, we're Christians, but we don't walk on water. We don't want to, throw it in your face. But no, we're Christians. We walk on water. That's what we do. And that's the thing that makes you go, oh, I'm a Christian. That's what I loved about the video, was that the video was sharing with you guys is now we can live holy like he calls us to live. Now we can walk and be blemish free and spot free. We have this privilege now. That's what's attractive about God. What's not attractive about God is a Christian complaining about the complications in their life. That is not attractive. Because what you're actually doing is you're taking this axe, this sin, and we're just chopping off every possibility, every ounce of joy. We are cutting it in two, and it's not reaching the people. And they don't look at us any different than anyone else that they come in contact in their life. There's no difference between us and the world. And that's why Paul tells us, be set apart from this world. Don't be of this world. Don't fall into these sins, and don't fall into these moments of your whiningness. Remember who you are. Paul calls out to Timothy, remember that moment. Feed that feed that excitement that you have with the Holy Spirit. So that's what we're going to do right now. I'm going to ask Judith. Judith, will you please come up and just pick away on that guitar? So I've been preaching really long the last two messages, and I apologize. And so this morning I made my message quick, because this is what I want to do. I want to pray for people. I want to pray for people to overcome these complications. And what we're going to do is pray for the clarity to go back to where the axe head fell. That's what I want to do. I want to pray for where that complication began, so that you can put the cross in it and you can pull out whatever it is that you've lost.